Hello, friends. Welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with Generalissimo of Getting It On, Chris Prunty, along with our continued special guest, Daniel Quinn. Gentlemen, good to have you with us today. On today's episode, we continue on with our second part of the deep dive into the Path of Thorns, where we discuss the geography, points of interest, and we do a world building jam to create a dungeon within the Path of Thorns itself. So, gentlemen, considering where we stopped off last time, where do you want to start today?
I think going into the geography of, generally we were talking about it being a wide open area. Is that what you're seeing?
I had an idea of a lot of plains, a lot of forests, and I think some mountainous canyons and whatnot. I definitely have the idea that this place is landlocked, and it is they're not ocean going people for the most part. You know.
No. I if anything, the Dothraki Sea, just oceans of grass. If anything,
something like that. More trees though.
No floating cities, I'm guessing, because we don't like them.
Yeah, no. Floating cities
floating
are like.
cities?
Although for a moment we almost had mobile cities. Like that Mortal Engines, a terrible movie. Almost. Remember?
Never saw that movie. I'm
you
good.
Almost added those. I was going to help you. I was going to back you.
I see
Yeah.
where you were going with it. No, I just wanted little caravans.
That's fine.
Caravans are fine, and caravans are fully supported. Like, let's be real. But in terms of geography, yeah, that is the major idea that I had in mind. In particular, we are going to be going over major geographical locations as well. What were some of yours?
I'm just picturing an incredibly long, flat area, kind of like that is just fields of grain and corn and other things, and there's just nothing out there. Like, this is where the bounty this is the breadbasket.
Yes. I had a similar area in mind as well, something like the like High Garden, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, this is where a lot of the food comes from, and they have to produce a lot of food in order to support the amount of people that they're actually, you know, supporting.
Could those fields, could underneath them be the remnants of whatever the slavers that owned them in the past? Like, that makes the land fertile, and that's why all that food is growing there.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually
You have something for that?
I have something very, very related.
Okay.
It's my point of interest.
Okay.
So I'm going to put a pin on that for now. Yeah. Daniel, what did you have for your geography thing?
I had in mind these gorges, which could be called like the gorges of games or something similar. It sounds a little unwieldy.
The scars of the earth.
Something less violent, perhaps. But there are these places where there's like lots of flowing waters where different cultures inside of the Path of Thorns get together to throw like a massive set of games. And maybe it happens like once a century, or maybe it happens once a generation. So everyone gets together and they all participate in these games, and it's a big like community event.
That's really fun. So I imagine that the gorges themselves are like just kind of a sacred area or something like
They're
that.
real well maintained and respected. Yeah.
Now that I'm bringing it up, because my point of interest is also kind of similarly a gorge of some kind. I think that we should add the fact that it is lots of forest, lots of beautiful fields, and then massive gorges that are just like carved out as though like a giant beast just kind of came by and raked its claws down the center of this or down the earth.
Like the
or
river
something like
claws,
that.
you know?
Yeah. And it's not just rivers, but it's also just gorges like that we're talking about. Have you, how big do you imagine these gorges being exactly?
Since it's fantasy, they should be enormous, like ridiculously big. I'm thinking like Martian mountain kind of sizes, because we can go crazy.
See, I was thinking like Nordic fjords, like that type of deep and humbling.
Yeah,
because
that's what I mean.
Because I actually think that adding in a geographical reason for you to feel humbled and part of a community is like looking up at these massive things that are so much larger
like
than
dwarf
yourself.
the sky, like when you're down there.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, oh, the time changes because of how deep you are.
Yes,
essentially.
that's
that
what. I want something crazy like that.
Yeah, having hiked a lot of those fjords man, that is serious. And you do feel so tiny and so small and so humbled by the earth. It's kind of, I've never been to the Grand Canyon, but I imagine that when you look out into that vastness, it's kind of like that sense of, oh, I'm tiny. It's kind of like how, astrologers now look out into the giant gaping maw of the universe and be like, oh, we're nothing but dust. That
By
type
astrologers, you mean astronomers?
I do mean astronomers.
I wasn't sure if you were being facetious.
I was talking about the people who do a lot of drugs and then astral project themselves out into the universe. Yeah. I apologize, astronomers.
So, the area that I had was kind of based on the flat plain that is just filled with grass, but I wanted it to be something that, due to the fact that they had made into this iron-like consistency, that it was like the razor fields. And it's the fact that while it is just as flexible glass, fine grains of grass, it's kind of like walking through shards of glass.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I again, I'm just going to go into my point of interest because that is very similar to what I have, where it is the Sea of Iron, where it is. So when they were initially overthrowing the tyrant that subjugated their people, the leaders of the Path of Thorns had smashed the armies of the old tyrants, and they looked at each other and they're like, all right, we have to do a divine coalescence. Otherwise, we're just going to get destroyed and wiped out by the Path of Thorns. And so in a forced and coerced divine coalescence, they fucked up the ritual, obviously, and created this massive beast that's fueled by hate and rage and is immortal and is basically just ate everything in sight, was completely just absolutely demolished everything. And thus we had a trio of God pacted from the Path of Thorns become the heroes by leading this massive beast into a canyon filled with brambles and using their God-pacted ability to explosively grow the brambles and turn them into a steel substance, essentially. You're creating this massive pit of thorns that this thing is still alive in this gorge somewhere.
It's trapped.
And it's trapped because it's not going to die. It cannot die, but it can be contained. And thus it has been, okay, you have to make sure that, bam, the brambles have grown around it. It's caught up in its hide and its, whether it be fur or, some kind of chitin or whatever it may be. This thing is essentially, they use their ability to bury it in a sea of bramble. And that area is completely unusable now. And that is also a testament to tyranny and the idea that the Path of Thorns can contain and thematically, obviously, overcome something that is otherwise just completely awful.
That's like so super cool. Like, I feel like it thematically makes sense, but it also literally is doing what the theme is talking about.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to do, and the other thing, I didn't want them to be able to kill it because I
never truly kill tyranny.
Right, and also because there's the idea that I wanted them to outsmart this thing rather than just be like, hey, we're good warriors and we killed it. They didn't need to. They outsmarted it, and that is, again, how you overcome tyranny and evil, essentially, is you don't fight fascism with more fascism. You fight fascism with kindness and overall just being a better ideology.
Well, they innovated, essentially.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Right. So that's my point of interest. What do you guys have? Or do you have questions?
I mean,
think of some questions.
My point of interest was kind of too similar.
Okay. Well, what was it?
It was really just going to be the invasive area called the glass field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was going to be geographic, but I also wanted it to be a landmark kind of thing. Sometimes they intertwine.
I mean, maybe we can merge them. So, like, if there's this creature that's kind of bound in the brambles, maybe the conflict that led to that final moment, it's surrounded by these fields of glass and ruin from the previous civilization.
That's actually a really good idea.
Like to get to it takes work.
Yeah,
that's essentially where it started, right? Mm-hmm. And then they started with the field of glass, and then dragged it into this
the pit.
Yeah, well, so not dragged, but tricked it in. Yeah, that's good. Daniel, what did you have?
So mine is related to death.
Lovely.
Yeah. So it's called the Gyre, and it's this immense pit that's deep. Maybe it's deep within a forest, or it's deep in the middle of a field that's difficult to get to. Or it's maybe at the top of a peak. And it's full of like thorns and underbrush and foliage, and it's where followers of the Path of Thorns go to die. So like they go to that pit and they give their bodies back to the earth by falling into it.
Oh.
So either they know they're at the end of their life and it's it's the final step forward through life through the pit, or they know they maybe have terminal illness and they've given up, so they're gonna go through the pit. Basically, like this gyre is where everyone comes back together again at the end of their lives.
That's actually really fascinating because it's also like symbolically your last act of giving back to the land.
Yeah.
Like again, going back to community and roots and everything like that.
It's full circle.
Yeah, it's a full circle. It's just one big pit though.
It's a giant gyre. Like it's called a gyre maybe because it's a pit, but it's like a swirl too. It's like a vortex, but it's a big pit.
No, I know what a
Yeah,
gyre
and so
is,
nobody knows how far down it goes, but it's an enormous pit.
See, okay, that's a cool idea and I appreciate it. But here's where my brain goes. Is just a massive bone serpent rising from the depths. It's like, oh, that's where we normally got rid of our dead. But now it's like, hey, guess what, motherfucker? It's like, oh no, it's just been collecting evil. And now it's a giant, it's like Nito from Dark Souls.
I think
it's a
of it as like
of skeletons.
sacred. So like maybe because like the things that go down into it, and a lot of them will be Spriggan, right? Like they're turned back into the earth. So people don't view it as like an evil place, but more like a sacred place or a place of peace.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying it's evil. I'm
but
just
it
like
could be used for that purpose.
That's where my brain goes 100% of the time.
Obviously, the psionic quills will come and
no, what's going to happen to that pit, right?
Yeah.
The apotheosis is going to come.
Yes.
And where do they start with a bunch of giant evil necromancers? It's like, oh, I'm so glad that you've already collected our giant army for us.
Yeah.
So much time.
Exactly.
It's a bone cannon. It's going to be like
shoot them out.
Just shooting up out of
armies of dead Spriggan.
Oh my god.
It's giant. Then they can become giant and they're undead. It's going to be great.
Daniel, why you do this? This is
because I love democracy.
Oh my god.
Yep. All right. I do think now in our last episode, I know that we talked about the idea that cities are less of a thing or not so much less of a thing, but they're not like as grand as you might think of something like from the Bank of Death, for example, or even the Caliphate. But what I did want to talk about, because there is this idea of a capital, right? Of a grand particular city. And I did want to talk a little bit more about what that might look like or what those areas might look like. Because the idea that I had is that this is not a particular individual area that is the capital. It's the city where everything happens from, but maybe it's a collective of sites that are, hey, this is an area that's important, and then we're going to go here and important things happen. And then up north, there's a similar place that we can go to, and that is important as well. That kind of idea. What do you think about that?
I also do kind of see it as like an area where people travel to and also kind of set up kind of satellite kind of communities.
That's not a bad idea. One of the major things that I did want to make sure is that there's some kind of an amphitheater or some kind of an idea that there's a pulpit of some kind where you can go, and it's essentially the Senate, right, from Rome or something like that. Where, if you're going to give a lot of these public speeches and have a lot of intense political debates, you want something that's going to project, right? That's the idea.
And these spaces are temporary, essentially.
No, these are fixed spaces.
Oh, okay, I see.
So that's why like people gather around these spaces in general.
They're known spaces, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yeah.
No, I think it ties back into the idea of like giving everyone a voice, like a kind of an equal voice. So it gives an environment for the voice, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how would you say people move between the parts of the capital?
Well, when you talk about a capital, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with the idea that there is a capital per se, but there are political hotspots essentially where things get together. And it's like, it is known that this area regardless of where you are. It's kind of like a Capitol building, right? Where, okay, there's no White House in every state of the United States, but there's like a governor's mansion, essentially. But in this case, I want it to be something like there's a set of standing stones or something that is a monument to, you know, the collective of the Path of Thorns.
So it's like when Chris was saying that their buildings are collectively used. These are collectively used kind of like political space structures.
Yeah.
I see now.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it now.
Exactly right.
Right. And every major area, whether it's like a city or a town, they all have some structure devoted to this.
Hold on. I got an idea. Why don't we make libraries the point where, because I mean, libraries are shared knowledge, right? Why not make them the main political focus of whatever area they're in? Because it's, hey, we're sharing knowledge, and it's also an area that's can be quiet or at least kind of reserved in a lot of ways. So it makes sense if you want to have a debate, if you want to have a gathering of people to have discussions, it makes sense to have them be there in a sense, right?
Yeah, it's got that Greek feel to it too, where the center of kind of political thought has something to do with art, you know?
Yeah. Not only that, but okay. So thinking about because I do want to, one thing that Chris brought up was the idea that there's like an open air feeling to a lot of this. And I do want to keep that with the library.
Yeah.
So how do we keep an open air library idea?
Well, a library could be, the structure of it could be beneath the earth, but maybe the place where people gather is an open space. So like maybe where you come out of the vaults of the library to read together and to talk together, but you can go down these vaults to get all the information.
Okay. Yeah, I can.
It can also kind of be set up in that area of open floor plan kind of thing, because the top floor can also be where people who are retired but experts, they can lecture and
They're
do things
literally
there.
the books.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like a shared experience type thing. That's really brilliant. I like that a lot.
And it could be more than a library. It could also be a museum of sorts. You know, if we're talking about
The history
shared
of the town,
information.
yeah.
Yeah. Like their art could also be stored there for that area. And
I love the idea of people libraries because again, it
Yeah.
goes back to community and shared knowledge.
Yeah.
And you know what better, and not only that, but you're building roots within your community by, I come back to the same person. I have lunch with them every day and they tell me a little bit more about their lives. And
maybe they live, those people that have retired, quote unquote, to be knowledge founts, they live in these libraries.
Yeah,
They
that's
live
how they
under
can
it.
give the most
Yeah.
to the community right
By
now.
staying there, yeah.
Yeah, even if it's someone who was just a manual like laborer and does not have
Yeah.
some sort of expertise like chemistry or something, he can still pass on knowledge as far as
About
like
how to do manual labor. Like,
Yeah.
that's a skill, right?
one of the things that I have a problem, and this is not meant to be such a easy transition, but how do you do dungeons when there's not a physical like big area? Like if they don't have something that's somewhat constant, everything's shared. Dungeons are inherently like sequestered away and like separated.
Random battles.
I was thinking more of like, these are the ruins from the old empires that they've taken over, you know, like really have it be a Russian vault style, you know, where it's, or a bunker type thing where it's, this is where the last vestiges of tyranny once stood, that type of thing. But
It could be like a bunch of Star Destroyers underneath.
Yeah, that have been
Oh
under
my
the ground,
God.
and they each have a Death Star.
can we
attached
just
to
stop
them.
talking about Star Wars?
Never. I will never give it up. Never.
Oh my God.
No, but the other thing I was interested in too, so you mentioned it makes sense that the previous empire would have had these horrible places, right, that are remnants. But I also wonder what's the essentially the dark side of the Path of Thorns. Like, what is the dangerous aspect to this? Because we want to have an impulse to the places as somewhat utopian, but there's got to be some disadvantage. So what is that? And I imagine the dungeons are connected in some way to that.
I would also imagine that it's not an easy life to live,
No.
right? Because it's a matter of you're constantly striving and constantly trying to provide for others and yourself. And you're also trying to, because again, I would also imagine that there is less of a physical danger and more of an ideological danger when it comes to this place, because not only are you, because I mean, I guess part of it is, right, like once you're focused on is getting your job done essentially, where does your soul go?
Well, you're giving too much, right?
Right.
So that's the danger then.
Right. It's a matter of you lose yourself to the collective.
Yes.
And there's no ambition necessarily, even though there is, but it's a matter of, well, I'm an artist. Where does that fit in? Yes, I found my place, but if I'm accepted and there's no struggle, what's the point? There's an ambivalence to it almost.
So if we take that like from a metaphorical and turn it into like a literal fantasy construct, like what if, to go back to Chris's point too, like what if there are open spaces into which you can wander and you lose yourself and that becomes a dungeon?
Like a physical representation of the place, of where you would lose yourself.
Yeah, like are those places are out in the open and you can wander into them. You know, I don't want to go back to the shard too much, but something along the lines of it not being buried.
Why not just have it be, I mean, if we want to go back to, you know, the mythological or even like the folklore, have it be the forest.
Yes,
right?
that's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like it's a space you think you can trust and your ideology matches up with it, but when you go too far.
Yeah.
Problem.
That's actually, yeah.
Yeah.
And that we can wrap that back to geography where, you know, like you have vast fields of plain, but you go too far and all of a sudden you're lost amongst, you know, the endlessness of it all.
Yeah.
And, you know, the outskirts of the forest, but when you go too far, you go too deep and you lose yourself
Right.
among the collective that is the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You lose your own identity even.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty brilliant way to, you know, put forth the symbolic trappings of the ideology. That's
Right.
fascinating. Not only that, but I imagine that like what would happen then is kind of a perversion of giving yourself back to it, right? So
You've
it's
lost your identity, you know.
you lose your identity, and also, there's so many ideas that I can go that I'm thinking of. So one, you either you get transformed into a doppelganger of some kind,
Yes.
some kind of a faceless monster who needs to steal other people's identities
Yes.
because they've lost their
Love
own.
that.
Alternatively, it could be you are literally absorbed into nature itself. You are a sylvan,
Like an
creature.
Annihilation where they kind of start merging with their environment.
God, that's
Yeah, that's
Right.
horrifying.
especially fungus.
That's the kind of dark side I wanted. Yeah, especially
Yeah.
oh my god, the
Yeah.
No, Daniel, that's actually a really brilliant way to kind of introduce the idea of because again, if we're doing this, I want to be smart about it. I want it to be thematic, and I want it to be like, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's a great idea, dude.
I mean, it comes from what you guys just said. I was just trying to piece it
No,
together.
but
here.
like
Yeah.
no, but like
Yeah.
you know, kind of creating cohesion and putting that together. That's really brilliant.
I'm cracking my foot. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh man. Okay. So with that, you did bring up dungeons and whatnot. So let's go ahead and go to the Worldbuild Jam, where we get to create a dungeon live on air. Well, not live and not on air. So, you know, whatever. It's fine.
None of those words are accurate, but you know.
Yeah. If you've listened to us do this before, then you know what's going on.
But they are words.
They are words, yeah. And we are going to do it right now with very minimal editing, unless Chris says something again. But you know.
What?
God damn it. Leave Chris alone.
Okay, with all of that really intelligent talk, we now get to just devolve into gibbering mouthers and try and come up with a theme and all that. So,
Unspeakable horror.
yeah, we can only hope, right? So, and this is the thing, dungeons, right, as much as you want them to be an extension of the theme of the nation state, makes just as much sense when they are aberrations or when they're outsiders compared to the theme, because that makes the invasiveness of the dungeon stick out even more.
I mean, dungeons are traps in the end, like thematically, right?
Yeah.
So they're traps of the ideology, like you said before.
Yes. So let's go ahead. We've got 8 themes: madness, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, the unspeakable, triumph, and hope. And then once we've got the dungeon, we've got the setting, we've got all that. So we're going to create a dungeon surrounding a theme. And then once we're a little bit through that, we're going to go and throw in a twist to fuck it all up. And let's see how it goes. First things first. We've got the unspeakable.
Oh,
hey.
lovely.
Chris with the called shot. Okay. So with the unspeakable often means something like cosmic horror, right? That's where my brain goes. When
or a shameful secret.
Right. That's actually what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something like a genocide or something along those lines.
I mean, this is more of a point of history, but my idea comes from what if, and not to take away from your good rebellion, your goody two shoes, all of this, but what if one of the shameful secrets was the fact that the Path of Thorns purposely instigated things to start the spark that began the revolution? Imagine if, like, the person who fired the first shot was a was a Path of Thorns agent that then fired into the crowd of his compatriots, but that then ensued into the revolution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the idea that the conflict came from within, and at the end of the day, like, they had good reasons.
Yeah,
right.
And, like, all of the good that it does, and that is exactly what they tell themselves. But in the truth, it's also the fact this is a lie.
Maybe to follow on that, maybe whatever plan they put in motion led to massive deaths in that first revolution. But if it was instigated by them, it's on them then, essentially.
Like, I'm not sure if Deep Space Nine, Garrick, and
yes, exactly.
Like how it's effectively a fake
had
terrorist plot.
The bigger vision in his mind.
Just like, and the worst thing is, I would do it all again.
Right.
The idea that I had in mind when you're talking about this is, it's not just a matter of, they instigated this plot to kind of spark a rebellion, but I like to think of it that they didn't know that the enemy was going to go as far as they actually do.
Right.
So they thought, they'd kill a couple people and we'd be able to rally more people to our cause. But what ended up happening is something truly unspeakable in the massacre of an entire people.
Yeah.
Maybe instead of, because originally it was a coalescence between two different gods, maybe what ended up happening is the total annihilation of a third god that was supposed to be part of this coalition, and their people were just wiped out, their god heart destroyed, and with that, genocide ended up being this is this is the unspeakable act. And there is an incredible amount of guilt among the other two that is passed down to let people know, don't do this. Make sure that what you do is pure and good.
I'm always thinking of ways to take what you just said, thematically, and make it literal, right? Because
Please
fantasy tends to show it to you, the thing that you're feeling. So take that third culture that was totally wiped out, genocidally destroyed. Their god heart was not only broken, but ground to dust. And now it blankets the forest, that deep out forest, where when you wander into that forest, you breathe it in, and that's what turns you into those horrific kind of doppelgangers or merged things. You're breathing in the perpetually falling ashes of that god heart.
Damn.
So this iron forest and everything is playing two roles. One, it's a horrible place to go into, but also the reason that they're fine with keeping it around is because they're with any luck, people will forget that there was ever even a town there.
Mm-hmm.
It is a testament to their ever-living shame and guilt. And fuck it. That's pretty brilliant. And I imagine that they've grown a deeper forest around it to try and cover it up and hide what happened. And it's no.
When you go in there, then you feel it on your body.
Yeah.
Because the god heart can never go away fully.
Woo. Oh, man. All right, now let's throw in a twist and fuck it all up. That's a great idea.
It's a romance.
Wasn't one of these? It was all robots. Because that.
Yes,
I don't want to do a called shot for that one for this.
It was all robots. Aliens did it.
All right, let's go ahead and see what we got.
Cocked.
All right, so
what did we roll?
I rolled a 15, which says, "Okay, now go super dark with it."
God. Okay, so if
feel
breathing
like
in
we've
the
already-
genocide of
How do we go darker?
Yeah, I was like,
How do we go to vellum black?
how do we go to that black that guy isn't allowed to
Fanta
buy
black?
anymore? No, the darker one.
Oh.
if in their history they constantly remark the fact that it just like they instigated it, they were the ones who fired the first shot, and this is why tyrants around the world have to die. And it's just like if someone finds out, it undermines our entire message.
So it's a threat to the whole ideology.
I still believe they're good, and the ends do justify the means, but
At least in this regard.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go even darker with it. There are agents. There is a separate sect of the Path of Thorns that prevents that knowledge of ever leaking out. So to go really dark, even darker than the darkest of darks, how can you get more black than that? To quote Spinal Tap. These people, all they do is make sure that whoever discovers this die or become the monster that they should be.
And in a way, they are patriots.
They're patriots.
Like, just like we recruit from around our nation only the most patriotic and the most civic-minded people because we have to do the terrible
and they have
deed.
to believe in that, yeah.
That is really dark and depressing. And I'm so glad that we get to end on a depressing note for the Path of Thorns.
Chris, do you remember in the Shitty New Picard show, the
Section 31?
No, well, so there's like the Tal Shiar, but there's like the more secret Tal Shiar, the Oshkosh Bagosh, whatever the hell they were called. Like, that's essentially what this is.
I hate when they do anything that goes beyond, like, once you introduce your secret organization.
Yeah, they're the super
them,
secret.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's just like, hey, you know who heads the CIA? The Illuminati.
The super CIA.
And then once you have the Illuminati, you then go
where are you
just
gonna go?
like, yeah. And then they're ruled by the lizard people. And you're like, all right, it's just absurd now.
It's dumb.
Whew.
Fear the sky, chemtrails.
Honestly, I actually needed that. I really needed that to get out of that super dark place that we were just in. So that's it's kind of nice.
Yeah, let's hug up.
Anything else that we want to go with for the Path of Thorns?
I want to play the super sleeper agent characters.
Sure.
No.
I also
Maybe Cutter's a super sleeper agent.
Hey, there you go.
Oh no, that's Ashenboard. Damn it. Never mind.
you are the cutest of Borg.
Yes.
I always think
apparently the Romulans made the Borg in this terrible show.
That doesn't make any
it's
fucking
so
sense.
fucking stupid. I can't even handle it.
And that'll about do it for this episode of World Build with us. I have been Rob Hilferty here with Chris Prunty and Daniel Quinn. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and send us an email to @WorldBuildWithUs, or you can send us some kind of an electronic message through the Twitters @Let'sWorldBuild. And until next time, remember that we love you very much, and you have a great week.